All right, welcome back to Community Focus here on Channel 6 TV. We're in Nelson County. I'm Kenny Fogle, and we got Robbie Smith here with us, and Robbie's going to tell us a bit about what's coming up next, and that's springtime. You know what that means. That means it's time for people to be out in their yards and in their gardens and find out what tree made it through the winter. You've got all kinds of work going on now, I bet.
All kinds of things are going on right now, and last week was a disappointment for spring break, but boy, this week turned out to be a nice one. And everybody is out in the yards. You can see the activity taking place right now. Main focus for a lot of folks is trying to get those yards in that pristine shape.
Yeah.
And there's good and bad about that. It makes everything look nice, but there's a lot of folks that really like that, leaving that, what we call weeds. The bees absolutely love,
Well, you're
so
true.
They like having the forage. That's their dining room, if you will.
Well, I put out some pre-emergent here several weeks ago, and also had fertilizer in with it, so that makes the yard grow anymore. But still, for existing weeds, that pre-emergent doesn't cut it, does it?
No, it's only there. It's applied to help get rid of crabgrass, and we're still within a window right now that we can apply a pre-emergent and get some pretty good control on crabgrass. Mm-hmm. It's all temperature related, and we had probably a little bit of germination 2 weeks ago, but last week really stopped that completely and probably killed off some of the early germination. So you still got this week to get that on, and that we don't like to apply with fertilizer in the spring because exactly what you said, we're feeding weeds and putting the grass to the test. We're really having to mow quite a bit more. It's growing faster than we want to, and the rule is that you don't want to remove but about a third of the grass blade at any one time. So when it grows real fast, we end up having to get it back down too quickly, and it kind of ruins the vigor of the plant. So fertilize in the fall, but it's so hard to find just the pre-emergent without the fertilizer.
That's true. Well, I couldn't. So.
Yeah, it's a tough one to find. They like to sell it with, they got to sell it with a carrier because the stuff doesn't spread very well. Yeah. So they just put some fertilizer in it to do that.
Right. Well, one of the things I know, this is something you told me last year, and I'm getting up in age a little bit, and it hit me that I learned it last year, so it took me that many years to pick up on it, is I thought, I jumped the calendar a little bit. I'd say, I know Fred Wishy years ago said, never put your garden out before May the 10th, and I said, I looked at the weather, and I said, if it's April 20-something, I said, I can go ahead and get my garden out. But I think what you told me is it really didn't matter because without the ground temperature, it didn't make it's just going to sit in the ground and rot anyway.
Right. Yeah. It's there's a lot of factors there, and I had this conversation just before I left the office. Is that the temperature, the root zone temperature, the soil is still pretty cold, and that they just don't move out of that ball. You just don't get any growth on the plant, so it sits there, and then it becomes susceptible through all the stresses of having disease problems. And we think about tomatoes because that's the most popular one. That's the one everybody wants to get out and wants to be able to get the tomato by 4th of July, right?
Right.
By putting it out in middle of April, it sits there and sits there. And then we end up with early blight disease where it fires up from the bottom. Yeah. So I'm a strong believer that if you can wait, put 1 or 2 plants out there, but don't put the bulk of your plants out until that middle of May. You're going to be a whole lot more successful on the longevity of the crop. You're going to get tomatoes all the way through the season into October versus having those, the pride of that very first one. You can have a couple of plants out for that, but make sure most of yours are coming in later on in the season. And you'll avoid a lot of that disease issue.
Now, if anybody's got this recorded, rewind what he just said there because the sense of it makes more sense the more I thought about it, but I always thought, I got to beat that May 10th thing because the quicker I get it out, the quicker I'll get tomatoes. But basically, I'm doing myself more harm by being impatient and getting too much of a hurry.
Yeah, it's really all about the disease issues on tomatoes and a lot of the other crops too. If the plant is not happy, it's going to be susceptible, just like us, to a lot more disease problems and the foliar diseases like...
Well, I had a lot of that blossom rot last year. I did have a lot of that.
Blossom end rot is more to do with intermittent amounts of water. The plant's uptaking, so it goes through dry spells and wet spells. So it doesn't take calcium up into the plant like it should. And calcium is vital to cell wall structure. And so when you look at the tomato, the fruit on it, the very end of it is the last part that's being built. So the calcium runs out before it gets to that point, and you end up, so it's not a disease, it's a cultural thing. If you keep it moist through the whole growing season, you'll have less of a problem with that calcium being in deficiency. And so keeping a moist throughout the season will get you a whole lot further down the road. I think it's temperature and moisture related.
So what does people need to be doing right now, yard-wise and garden-wise, to get preparing?
Well, it's really a good idea to get ahead of those weeds right now in the landscape. And my favorite tool is a little scuffle hoe. It's one that just scoots across the surface of the soil and cuts those roots off, because most of the weeds we're dealing with are what we call winter annuals. They germinated last fall and are growing through the winter and are happy then. If we just cut them off, they're not going to come back, unless it's something like a dandelion or an onion, those kind of things that are perennial. Most of the weeds that are in the landscape right now are winter annuals, and if we cut them off and just rake them away, then we've done an immense amount of good. You can put down your pre-emergent herbicides in your landscape beds, like the Treflan products like Preen or some of the other products that you might see out there. You can, in fact, a lot of folks don't know this, is that you can control grasses within landscape beds with a spray. So if you've got grasses like fescue or Bermuda grass or any of these others coming up through your hosta beds or your iris beds, then you can spray to get rid of those using a grass herbicide only. Grass
but it doesn't bother the flowers?
Won't bother the broadleaves. If you want more information on that, you can give me a holler at the office, 348-9204, and I'll be glad to tell you exactly which ones it is, because there's one brand name that you'll see around town. It's called Grass Beater, I think, by Bonide. And that's got sethoxidime in it, but it's a grass killer only. It's only going to kill grass and not anything else. So, and it's, so that's a good tool to have if you've got that kind of a problem.
Now, a few minutes ago, you talked about fertilizing. You said it's not necessarily the best time to fertilize this time of year. I know I've always heard that if you're going to fertilize, do it in September or October time frame. But so basically, if somebody's looking to fertilize their lawn, they need to, again, be a little more patient and hold off.
Well, the next time frame that we have that we recommend fertilizing lawns is the 1st of June. And that's really only if the lawn looks peaked. If you've got a little yellow cast to it, it's not growing like to suit you, then you can put some fertilizer out to give that. And we always recommend soil testing, because for the most part in our county, we don't need a lot of phosphorus. Well, some places need a lot of phosphorus and some parts of the county need absolutely none. So soil testing tells us that phosphorus is a problem with runoff and those kind of things, and it helps us deal with cleaning the water better as well. And then, so soil tests will tell us more about what you need exactly. And so June would be a time that you can put some fertilizer down to get them growing. But by far, that fall range is the best, because we're building a root system. We're sending carbohydrates into the root system. It's storing it and waiting for the spring before it starts using all those sugars, and it's ready to go.
Well, I'm going to ask you a little crystal ball question.
Okay.
Obviously, looking at a long-range forecast, which I'm sure you do on a basis. Is there any way to look ahead to tell what crops are going to be doing better this year? And I'm not necessarily talking about corn and soybeans. I'm talking about green onions and peppers and things like that. If somebody's going to put out a garden, do you know what questions you're going to be getting asked about the middle of July?
No, it's really hard. Now, I can tell you as we progress along what I'm going to be getting. Say in the middle of April, middle of May, I'll know what July is going to be like. If it's been a wet spring, I know what July is going to be like because of the disease issues. If it's a dry spring, then the calls go down because there's less disease issue. And usually that's the big problem, disease and insects bothering plants. And so it depends on if we have an average spring, meaning that it's, temperatures are average and we're not cold and we're not way too hot, and the rainfall is the right amount, not too many days in a row that are wet, we're just hitting the right rains, then we're not going to have big issues with most everything. But insects, when it's wet and cold, you'll have spider mites just blow up. And when it's wet and warm, we're going to have a lot of diseases. So those are the issues that...
This is going to be a Japanese, was it not the Japanese beetle year or whatever?
Could very well be a Japanese beetle year, because if you remember last year when they were out and mating and laid eggs, we were still pretty moist. So they were able to get the eggs back into the ground, and the eggs properly hatch and move through their cycle. In years that were really dry, they have a hard time both emerging and getting the eggs back into the ground, so we have less numbers the next year. But last year we had a pretty good population.
So we're hoping for a dry spring then of some sort.
Well, we're hoping for an average spring,
yeah.
Whatever that means in central Kentucky, right? It's always a little different, but we got numbers that tell us about where we usually are, and we know that right now we're probably 5 or 10 degrees above normal, and that's okay, that range. But if you get 2 weeks of 5 and 10 degrees above normal, then we know we could have some problems.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I know I'm not an organic gardener because I really don't know what that means. But I know some people are concerned about what they put on their, what kind of fertilizer, what kind of weed pest control they do. Does it make a difference on that as far as the healthiness of a plant, the healthiness of the fruits you're going to be eating?
Well, a lot of research has gone into looking at that, and it doesn't prove or disprove the quality of the produce. In countless tests, I mean, most produce produce is tested randomly across the country year after year, and we find that very small, minute amounts of chemicals make it into the grocery stores on produce. There's plenty of research and studies that report that. It's all about what you want. We can grow gardens. We used to do it 40, 50 years ago with either harsher chemicals or no chemicals at all, depending on what you could afford, right? Yeah. And that we grew gardens organically because that's all we had. We had cold hard steel in the hoe, or chickens to help with insect problems, and you just stayed in it and managed it. And you took time with your garden.
Think about the chicken. I need to get me some chickens.
Yeah, it's a popular thing. Lots of folks have chickens, and we, I think it's a good. Folks look at it as a food security issue, and what egg prices went crazy when they had the avian flu up in the Midwest there. So.
Well, you got farmers market coming up. Now, I know you all do a lot with the farmers market. I guess you all administer that to some degree. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, we help organize them and get all their paperwork in. There's like a lot of paperwork to fill out for what they do. We have an organizational meeting on Friday, actually, at the Extension office, starting at 9 o'clock, and we'll have folks like the scale folks from Frankfurt come down and calibrate scales or make sure scales are properly adjusted, and we'll have folks in from Frankfurt again. Sharon Spencer come down and go over rules and regulations with them, and so we'll have and we have trainings that day to get them all ready to go for the spring, and so they're approaching go time. Whether they'll have anything to take to the market right now. Things like asparagus are coming in. We'll probably got some lettuces that'll be there. The meat producers will still have some frozen goods and canned goods that'll go to the market. So it'll be opening up real soon.
Okay. Well, like I said, I know this is getting to be a busy time of the year for you. Obviously, I know there's a lot of things you get into, the tree diseases.
Yeah.
I mean, there's things of that nature. If somebody's got a tree, they want to identify what the problem, they bring that to you. And
bring that to me. We'll, a real good way right now is sending me images. You can send them to me by email or text, and it's a really good way of diagnosing. And most time, unless it's really fuzzy and out of focus, I can do a pretty good job of identifying.
So you got a crappy camera.
You got to make sure it's in focus and actually in the screen, before we can actually do any.
A picture of your goat if you want to see the ash tree.
That's right, that helps.
I guess that makes a difference. Well, the UK Extension Office, and the number's in the book, obviously, if somebody wants to get out. Every county has one.
Every county has one. So, we're under Nelson County, but phone number, if you I'll give it to you now, is 348-9204, and you can give me a holler anytime. Email is robsmith@uky.edu, and be glad to respond to those as well.
Okay, and I know right before we went on the air, we talked about different things that's going on, beekeeping and things like that. People don't realize what all agriculture can be sometimes. I know you deal with some major farming operations in Nelson County, but you deal with the average backdoor gardener like myself, or somebody that just wants to have a nice lawn.
Well, we're here to help whoever help people help themselves is kind of our motto. So whatever you're interested in, we're interested in helping you with it.
And the service is free.
Yep, the service is free.
Can't beat that. All right, Robbie Smith of the UK Extension Office here. If you want to know something about, if you want your lawn to look good, you want your garden to turn out well, this is the man you need to get a hold of. Give him a call at the UK Extension Office, and if you have a problem, he's there to help you out. Robbie, appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
We'll have you back in later in the year and see how we're progressing.
Very good.
All right, stick around. A lot more to come here on Community Focus. We'll be right back.